Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Chapter 8 The Potions Master. Their appearance. In which? Next to the tall youngster with the crimson hair. Wearing the glasses? Did you see his face? Did you spot his scar? Whispers observed Harry from the instant he left his dormitory the next day. People lining up outside lecture rooms stood on tiptoe to get a look at him, or doubled again to pass him within the corridors again, staring. Harry wanted they wouldn't, because he became seeking to concentrate on locating his manner to lessons. There were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide, sweeping ones, slender, rickety ones, a few that led somewhere distinctive on a Friday, a few with a vanishing step midway up that you had to bear in mind to bounce. Then there had been doorways that wouldn't open until you asked civilly, or tickled them in exactly the proper location, and doorways that weren't truly doors in any respect, but strong partitions just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where something became, because it all appeared to move around plenty, the human beings within the pick stored going to visit each different, and Harry became sure the coats of armor ought to walk. The ghosts didn't help, both. It was always a nasty shock while one among them glided all at once by a door you had been looking to open. Almost headless. Nick turned into always glad to factor new Gryffindors inside the right route, however. Peace the poltergeist become really worth 2 locked doorways and a trick staircase in case you met him when you have been overdue for class. He would drop waste paper baskets on your head, pull rugs from below your toes, pelt you with bits of chalk, or sneak up in the back of you, invisible, clutch your nostril, and screech, "Got your conch." Even worse than Peeves, if that changed into possible, became the caretaker, Argus Filch. Harry and Ron managed to get on the incorrect aspect of him on their first actual morning. Filch located them looking to force their manner through a door that sadly became out to be the entrance to the out-of-bounds hall on the 3rd ground. He wouldn't consider they had been misplaced, became positive they were attempting to break into it on motive, and was threatening to lock them inside the dungeons once they have been rescued through Professor Quirrell, who turned into passing. Filch owned a cat known as Mrs. Norris, a scrawny, dirt-colored creature with bulging, lamp-like eyes similar to Filch's. She patrolled the corridors on my own. Smash a rule in the front of her, position just 1 toe out of line, and she or he'd whisk off for Filch, who'd appear, wheezing, seconds later. Filch knew the name of the game, passageways of the college better than everybody, besides perhaps the Weasley twins, and will pop up as any of the ghosts. The scholars all hated him, and it was the dearest ambition of many to offer Mrs. Norris an excellent kick. After which, when you had managed to locate them, there had been the classes themselves. There has been lots more to magic, as Harry fast found out, than waving your wand and pronouncing some humorous words. They had to look at the nighttime skies through their telescopes every Wednesday at the hours of darkness and examine the names of different stars and the moves of the planets. 3 instances a week they went out to the greenhouses behind the castle to observe herbology, with a dumpy little witch referred to as Professor Sprout, in which they learned how to take care of all of the abnormal flowers and fungi, and observed out what they had been used for. Without difficulty, the most dull class changed into records of magic, which became the only one taught with the aid of a ghost. Professor Binns had been very antique certainly, whilst he had fallen asleep in the front of the body of workers' room hearth and got up next morning to train, leaving his body in the back of him. Binns droned on and on, while they scribbled down names and dates, and were given emetic the evil and Uric the oddball combined up. Professor Flitwick, the charms instructor, was a tiny little wizard who had to face on a pile of books to see over his desk. On the begin of their first elegance he took the roll name, and whilst he reached Harry's call he gave an excited squeak. and toppled out of sight. Professor McGonagall become once more extraordinary. Harry had been pretty right too. Think she wasn't a trainer to pass. Strict and smart, she gave them a talking to. The instant they sat down in her first class. Transfiguration is some of the maximum complicated and perilous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she stated. Every person messing around in my class will leave and not come lower back. You have been warned. Then she changed her desk into a pig and again once more. They had been all very impressed and couldn't wait to get started out, but soon realized they weren't going to be changing the fixtures into animals for a long time. After taking a lot of complex notes, they were each given a shape and commenced trying to show it into a needle. By means of the end of the lesson, simplest Hermione Granger had made any difference to her fit. Professor McGonagall showed the elegance how it had long gone. All silver and pointy, and gave Hermione a rare smile. The elegance everybody had virtually been looking ahead to became protection against the dark arts. However, Quirrell's training grew to become out to be a chunk of a shaggy dog story. His schoolroom smelled strongly of garlic, which everyone said was to thrust back a vampire he'd met in Romania and become afraid might be coming lower back to get him. One of these days. His turban, he advised them, had been given to him through an African prince as a thank you for eliminating a tough zombie. However, they weren't sure they believed this story. For one component, when Seamus Finnegan asked eagerly to pay attention how Quirrell had fought off the zombie, Quirrell went red and started out speaking about the climate. For any other, they'd observed that a funny scent hung around the turban, and the Weasley twins insisted that it become filled full of garlic as properly, so that Quirrell became included wherever he went. Harry turned into very relieved to discover that he wasn't miles at the back of all people else. Masses of humans had come from Muggle families and, like him, hadn't had any idea that they had been witches and wizards. There was so much to learn that even humans like Ron didn't have an awful lot of a head start. Friday turned into an essential day for Harry and Ron. They finally controlled to locate their manor all the way down to the high-quality corridor for breakfast without getting misplaced as soon as, "What have we got today?" Harry requested Ron as he poured sugar on his porridge. "Double potions with the Slytherins," said Ron. "Snape's head of Slytherin house. They are saying he always favors them. We'll be capable of see if it's real." "Want McGonagall desired us," stated Harry. Professor McGonagall changed into head of Gryffindor house, but it hadn't stopped her from giving them a large pile of homework the day before. Just then, the mail arrived. Harry had gotten used to this with the aid of Now, but it had given him a bit of a surprise on the first morning, when approximately 100 elves had streamed into the remarkable corridor in the course of breakfast, circling the tables till they noticed their proprietors and dropping letters and packages onto their laps. Hedwig hadn't delivered Harry anything so far. She every so often flew in to nibble his ear and have a bit of toast before going off to sleep in the Ollery with the opposite faculty owls. This morning, but, she fluttered down among the marmalade and the sugar bowl and dropped to be aware onto Harry's plate. Harry tore it open at once. It said, in a totally untidy scrawl, "Expensive Harry, I understand you get Friday afternoons off, so could you like to return and have a cup of tea with me around 3? I need to hear all approximately your first week. Send us an answer again with Hedwig. Hagrid." Harry borrowed Ron's quill, scribbled "Sure, please, see you afterward" the lower back of the observe, and dispatched Hedwig off once more. It turned into lucky that Harry had tea with Hagrid to look forward to, because the potions lesson became out to be the worst element that had occurred to him so far. On the begin of time period dinner party, Harry had gotten the concept that Professor Snape disliked him. By the quit of the first potions lesson, he knew he'd been incorrect. Snape didn't dislike Harry, he hated him. Potions training came about down in one of the dungeons. It became chillier here than up within the main fort, and could have been pretty creepy enough, without the pickled animals floating in glass jars all over the walls. Snape, like Flitwick, commenced the class by taking the roll call and prefer. Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name. "Ah, sure," he stated softly, "Harry Potter. Our new superstar." Draco Malfoy and his buddies, Crabbe and Goyle, sniggered in the back of their hands. Snape completed calling the names and appeared up at the elegance. His eyes had been black like Hagrid's, but they had none of Hagrid's warmth. They had been cold and empty and made you think of dark tunnels. "You are here to examine the subtle science and specific art of potion making," he began. He spoke in slightly extra than a whisper, but they stuck every phrase. Like Professor McGonagall, Snape had the gift of maintaining a category silent without effort. "As there's little foolish wand-waving right here, many of you will hardly ever accept as true with this as magic. I don't assume you will truly understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, ensnaring the senses. I can educate you how to bottle fame, brew glory, even stop her death, in case you aren't as large a gaggle of dunderheads as I generally have to educate." Greater silence observed this little speech. Harry and Ron exchanged looks with raised eyebrows. Hermione Granger changed into on the brink of her seat and seemed determined to start proving that she wasn't a dunderhead. "Potter," said Snape unexpectedly. "What might I am getting if I introduced powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" "Powdered root of what to an infusion of what?" Harry glanced at Ron, who appeared as stumped as he turned into. Hermione's hand had shot into the air. "I don't recognize, sir," said Harry. Snape's lips curled into a sneer. "Tut, tut, repute without a doubt isn't the whole thing." He disregarded Hermione's hand. "Alas, try again. Potter, where might you appearance if I told you to discover me a bezoar?" Hermione stretched her hand as excessive into the air as it had moved without her leaving her seat, but Harry didn't have the faintest idea what a bezoar turned into. He tried not to have a look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, who had been shaking with laughter. "I don't recognize, sir." "Notion you wouldn't open a book earlier than coming, Potter?" Harry compelled himself to preserve searching straight into the one's bloodless eyes. He had looked via his books on the Dursleys, however did Snape anticipate him to keep in mind the whole thing in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi? Snape changed into still ignoring Hermione's quivering hand. "What is the distinction, Potter, among monkshood and wolfsbane?" At this, Hermione stood up, her hand stretching towards the dungeon ceiling. "I don't recognize," stated Harry quietly. "I assume Hermione does, even though, why don't you attempt her?" Some people laughed. Harry caught Seamus's eye, and Seamus winked. Snape, but, became no longer pleased. "Sit down," he snapped at Hermione. "For your statistics, Potter, asphodel and wormwood make a drowsing potion so effective it is called the draught of living death. A bezoar is a stone taken from the belly of a goat, and it'll save you from most poisons. As for monkshood and wolfsbane, they are the identical plant, which also goes by using the call of aconite." "Well, why aren't you all copying that down?" There has been an unexpected rummaging for quills and parchment over the noise, Snape stated, and a point could be taken from Gryffindor residents on your cheek, Potter. Things didn't enhance for the Gryffindors because the potions lesson continued. Snape positioned them all into pairs and set them to mixing up a simple potion to remedy boils. He swept round in his lengthy black cloak, looking them weigh dried nettles and crush snake fangs, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to love. He become just telling all of us to study the perfect manner. Malfoy had stewed his horned slugs, while clouds of acid green smoke and a noisy hissing filled the dungeon. Neville had by some means managed to soften Seamus's cauldron right into a twisted blob, and their potion turned into seeping throughout the stone ground, burning holes in humans' footwear. Inside seconds, the complete magnificence changed into status on their stools, while Neville, who had been sopping wet within the potion, whilst the cauldron collapsed, moaned in pain as irritated crimson boils sprang up all over his legs and arms. Fool boy, tangled up Snape, clearing the spilled potion away with one wave of his wand. I think you added the porcupine quills earlier than taking the cauldron off the hearth? Neville whimpered as boils started out to pop up throughout his nostril. Take him as much as the clinic wing, Snape spat at Seamus. Then he rounded on Harry and Ron, who had been operating subsequent to Neville. You, Potter, why didn't you inform him now not to add the quills? Thought he'd make you look correct if he were given it incorrect, did you? That's any other factor. You've lost for Gryffindor. This changed into so unfair that Harry opened his mouth to argue, but Ron kicked him at the back of their cauldron. Don't push it, he muttered, I've heard Snape can turn very nasty. As they climbed the steps out of the dungeon an hour later, Harry's mind turned into racing and his spirits had been low. He'd lost 2 factors for Gryffindor in his first actual week. Why did Snape hate him a lot? Cheer up, said Ron. Snape's always taking factors off Fred and George. Can I come and meet Hagrid with you? At 5 to a few they left the castle and made their manner across the grounds. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the brink of the forbidden forest. A crossbow and a pair of galoshes had been outdoor the front door. When Harry knocked, they heard a frantic scrabbling from internal and several booming barks. Then Hagrid's voice rang out, announcing, again, Fong. Again. Hagrid's huge, bushy face appeared within the crack as he pulled the door open. Hang on, he said. Lower back, Fong. He let them in, suffering to hold a hold at the collar of a tremendous black boarhound. There has been most effective one-room interior. Hams and pheasants have been placing from the ceiling, a copper kettle turned into boiling at the open fireplace, and inside the corner stood a huge bed with a patchwork duvet over it. Make yourselves at home, stated Hagrid, letting move of Fong, who bounded immediately at Ron and started licking his ears. Like Hagrid, Fong became simply not as fierce as he seemed. This is Ron, Harry advised Hagrid, who was pouring boiling water right into a massive teapot and putting rock desserts onto a plate. Any other Weasley, said Hagrid, glancing at Ron's freckles. I spent 1/2 me lifestyles chasing your dual brothers far from the wooded area. The rock desserts were shapeless lumps with raisins that nearly broke their tooth, however Harry and Ron pretended to be playing them as they informed Hagrid all about their first lessons. Fong rested his head on Harry's knee and drooled all over his gowns. Harry and Ron had been delighted to hear Hagrid name Filch that vintage git. And as fair that cat, Mrs. Norris, I'd like to introduce her to Fong sometime. Dia realize, on every occasion I'm going up to the faculty, she follows me. Everywhere? Can't eliminate her, Filch places her as much as it. Harry told Hagrid approximately Snape's lesson. Hagrid, like Ron, advised Harry no longer to fear approximately it, that Snape preferred infrequently any of the students. But he seemed to truly hate me. Garbage, stated Hagrid. Why ought to he? Yet Harry couldn't help questioning that Hagrid didn't pretty meet his eyes whilst he stated that. How's your brother Charlie? Hagrid requested Ron. I appreciated him lots. Superb with animals. Harry wondered if Hagrid had changed the challenge on motive. At the same time as Ron informed Hagrid all approximately Charlie's paintings with dragons, Harry picked up a bit of paper that turned into lying on the table beneath the tea secure. It become a reducing from the Daily Prophet. Gringotts smash in today's investigations keep into the spoilin at Gringotts on July 31st, broadly believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins nowadays insisted that nothing were taken. The vault that became searched had in reality been emptied the equal day. But we're no longer telling you what became in there, so keep your noses out if you realize what's appropriate for you, said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. Harry remembered Ron telling him at the train that a person had attempted to rob Gringotts, however Ron hadn't mentioned the date. Hagrid, said Harry, that Gringotts reckon occurred on my birthday. It would have been taking place while we had been there. There has been absolute confidence approximately it. Hagrid absolutely didn't meet Harry's eyes this time. He grunted and provided him any other rock cake. Harry examined the story again. The vault that turned into searched had in truth been emptied earlier that equal day. Hagrid had emptied vault 713, if you could call it emptying, getting rid of that grubby little package. Had that been what the thieves have been seeking out? As Harry and Ron walked lower back to the Citadel for dinner, their wallet weighed down with rock desserts they'd been too well-mannered to refuse, Harry idea that not one of the training he'd had to this point had given him as a whole lot to think about as tea with Hagrid. Had Hagrid amassed that package simply in time? Where turned into it now? And did Hagrid realize something approximately Snape that he didn't need to tell Harry?